Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining this webinar. Really pleased to be here today to speak with you. Again, my name is Christina Greever-Wilson with My Green Lab, and I'm on the certifications team on the My Green Lab team. And so I support the My Green Lab certification program, and I also run the International Laboratory Freezer Challenge, which will be the last third of my talk today. But the roadmap for what I'd like to discuss with you all is I'd like to start with the environmental impact of the scientific enterprise, the research sector globally, what's known about that, and why we as scientists, technicians, and staff in laboratories should bring sustainability into the culture of our laboratories. Then I'm going to talk a bit about all of My Green Lab's programs that are available to you all. And then I'm going to finish, of course, with the freezer challenge. So let's get started. So My Green Lab, we are a nonprofit, and our mission is to build a global culture of sustainability in science. And we really believe that science can lead the world in environmental sustainability and really transform our sector so that we are more energy efficient, water efficient, less carbon intensive, and bringing sustainability into all aspects of science. And really, the purpose of this, of course, is that, science, the research that we all do, the work we do in our biorepositories, this is benefiting human health and society. But the way in which science is conducted does not always do that. And so our goal is to ensure a world where science is conducted in a way that benefits the health and well-being of people and, of course, our planet too. And we do this through education and community engagement, our certification tools, and we try to inspire the scientific community to integrate sustainability into all aspects of research. So I'd like to start off just with a brief definition of sustainability. This is from the United Nations Brundtland Commission, 1987. Sustainability is meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability for future generations to meet their own needs. And I think this is really important to state and stand out. So we need what we need now, but we need to consider what future generations are going to need too. And of course, what we need now and in the future is, at a bare minimum, clean water, clean air, and the ability to produce healthy foods and access to that for all people in a just society. So sustainability, therefore, isn't just concerned with environmental costs and benefits. It's really a multifaceted concept, rolling people, the planet, and profits together into one unified concept. You can't have sustainability without environmental protection. You can't have it without social equity or without economic development too. So we need to meet the needs of the present without compromising the ability of our future generations to meet their own needs. And so how does the research enterprise and the healthcare system contribute to whether or not we have a bright future? And I'm going to talk a little bit about what we know about the environmental impact of research. And then let's talk about solutions. Let's talk about how we can all play a part in creating that brighter future for the world. So this is a report that came out a few years ago from Healthcare Without Harm, which is an organization that does similar work to My Green Lab, but specifically in the healthcare space. The healthcare sector, of course, their mission is promoting and protecting human health. But this sector also, and I'm sure some of you in the audience are part of this network as well, this is contributing to climate change as well. Climate change has been stated as the greatest threat of the 21st century. And healthcare, therefore, has an important role in resolving this challenge. Healthcare's climate footprint is equivalent to 4.4% of global net emissions, so 2 gigatons of carbon dioxide equivalent. And this is equivalent to the annual greenhouse gas emissions from 514 coal-fired power plants. And if the healthcare sector were a country, it would be the 5th largest emitter on the planet. So healthcare has a role to play, and so does the biotech and pharmaceutical industry. And this is something that My Green Lab has been looking into over the past few years. We've put out 3 iterations now of this carbon impact of biotech and pharma report that we have done in partnership with an organization called ICE, which acquired the organization Urgentum. And we've been looking into this to understand the magnitude of this sector's impact and to get buy-in for decarbonization solutions. Because as we know, companies, the scientists that work for them, they want data. And so we're trying to provide that data to them, to all of you. Many of these companies obviously are enormous with sprawling supply chains. There's a lot of money at play, but we certainly need to get buy-in from the largest companies in the biotech and pharmaceutical sector if we're going to see sustainable transformation within the research enterprise. And I feel like, thinking about the carbon impact of biotech and pharma, it's very related to the carbon impact of healthcare as well. We're hoping to expand this report in coming years to think about academic laboratories, government laboratories as well. But what we found is that, surprise, surprise, this is a carbon intensive sector. In 2022, it was ranked 26th out of all industries by this report. So this report's available on the My Green Lab website if you'd like to dig into it more deeply. But what was initially found by this report is that the majority of companies within biotech and pharma still do not have climate commitments aligned with a 1.5 degree C world. And so we're striving to change that, to really bring this to the forefront of the minds of these companies and provide solutions so that they can start to decarbonize, particularly their laboratories, but also the entire supply chain. All right, so with that being said, what should the role of the scientist or the technician or these companies be in trying to decarbonize the scientific enterprise? Looking at the impact of this sector on a broad scale, like we've done for the carbon impact of biotech and pharma report, this is relatively new for My Green Lab. Where we have our roots, where we got our start, is helping individuals and laboratories and their organizations make reasonable, manageable changes that improve the environmental impact of their laboratory operations. So how impactful are labs specifically? We know that labs are resource-intensive spaces. They consume more energy and more water than office spaces of a similar size. If you've ever walked into a lab, of course you know this. The fact that they consume, they have, equipment that's very energy intensive. This actually also drives the needs of the ventilation in these buildings, in these laboratory buildings, which are often very specialized spaces. For some context, a single fume hood can consume 3.5 US homes worth of energy in a single day. An autoclave can consume thousands of gallons of water in a week. The University of Exeter in the United Kingdom a few years ago did a simple estimate that the annual single-use plastic use of research labs worldwide is at least 12 billion pounds, which is enough to fill 67 cruise liners. That's likely an underestimate though. So we have energy at play, water at play, single-use plastics, the chemicals that we use for the research that we do. But I think it's important to point out that scientists, technicians in the lab actually have control over a portion of their energy use. You might think, oh, it's all the building. And a lot of it is the building, the ventilation system, the lighting, but about 35% of the energy consumption of laboratory spaces can be directly influenced by lab users. So plug load, which is the equipment that's plugged into the wall in your lab, and then also the lighting in your lab space, which If your lab does not have occupancy sensors, you are in control of when the lights come on and off. So I think this is important to point out. The building is important, and there are entire other organizations that are focused on designing and building sustainable lab buildings, doing very energy efficient renovations of these buildings. But where My Green Lab primarily works is empowering scientists to take action in the areas that they can influence. And we've been doing that for a long time, since 2013. So going back to our mission, we're building a global culture of sustainability in science with the hope of transforming this industry into a global leader on environmental sustainability. And we all have a role to play in the transformation of this sector. And I threw in a couple photos of some of the Freezer Challenge winners from 2023 that represent biorepositories, the Amsterdam UMC Biobank, and the Molecular Biology and DNA Bank at the Royal Botanic Gardens at Kew. But let's look at an overlay of where My Green Lab is working. These are 3 of our programs. So in green, the My Green Lab certification program used by laboratories around the world. The purple is Freezer Challenge participants from last year. And then in the teal color, the blue color, My Green Lab ambassadors. And so I'm going to talk about these programs more right now, but as you can see, we're working with labs in many parts of the world, and we're really excited to continue this trajectory of working in many labs and helping them think about how each lab member, each laboratory itself, each department, and each organization can really bring sustainability into all aspects of their research. Within reason, of course, your research aims are of the utmost importance here. That's why your laboratories exist. That's why biorepositories exist. You need to be able to do the work that you need to do. We understand that. And where we try and focus is, what are the small changes that can be made that are not going to negatively impact your research endeavors? And of course, these sustainable changes also should never impact or negatively impact safety or the health and well-being of lab members. So we work at this interesting intersection where we need to ensure that research can go forward, that our healthcare aims can go forward, but there are changes that we can all make in our day-to-day that have to do with the steps in your protocols, the equipment you choose to purchase, and the choices you make about your behavior in the laboratory itself. So that's where we focus. And I think it's important, let's talk briefly about My Green Lab's theory of change. This is from our strategic plan, but let's start at the bottom here, awareness. What we're doing today, even in this webinar, we are changing how we think about how we need to operate in our laboratories. The first step in our theory of change is thinking about or becoming more aware of the options that are out there so that we can then take action, changing how we act day to day in our labs, changing how we talk about sustainability, bringing it into the lab in a way that's recurring and that's revisited over and over, and it just becomes part of the fabric of the team that you have. Sustainability should not be just one person's responsibility. It should be a team effort by multiple people in the lab. And if we start by changing how we think, changing how we act, we can then influence the leadership at our organizations, the culture of our organizations, and the community here being the entire research enterprise. So this is the goal, and we start out with awareness and action, and that's where My Green Lab's programs sit. So this graphic shows My Green Lab's programs all together. We have an ecosystem of programs, and the goal of these is to help support labs at many different levels with their sustainability journeys. So at the top, we have our 2 certification programs. You might have heard about the My Green Lab certification program and also the ACT label, which is for laboratory products. The next layer down are our advocacy and education programs. So the Freezer Challenge, the Ambassador programs, and the Accredited Professional Program. And then we have some campaigns here. I actually feel like there's one missing called Converge, which really focuses on the biotech and pharma sector, leveraging My Green Lab certification for their suppliers. But the other two are that we're part of the United Nations Race to Zero and the Million Advocates for Sustainable Science. I'm not going to talk about all of these, but if you go to the My Green Lab website, which is just mygreenlab.org, you can read about all of these in a lot more detail. So I'm going to start off with probably what we're most known for, the My Green Lab certification program, and just give you a little overview of what this is. It is a way for a laboratory to get My Green Lab certified. And the way this program works is there's an online self-assessment that covers 14 key topic areas that are relevant to many different laboratories. And if any of these, well, if some of these do not apply to you, say field work or animal research, if you don't have cold storage, if you don't have some of the large equipment categories, you don't see questions pertaining to those. It takes about 30 minutes for each scientist in a laboratory to complete. And then we provide feedback on how your lab is performing today on a variety of sustainability best practices. And you're given an opportunity then to implement changes. Usually that's 3 to 6 months. And then the lab comes back to take this assessment a second time to get certified with us. So it involves many members of the laboratory, including the lab manager or lab lead, and it provides concrete ideas for how your lab can make sustainable changes. And through this program, we've heard from scientists and technicians that have done it that there are some benefits to doing this program. First and foremost, of course, a change in mindset, considering changes that can be made, rethinking your daily practices and what's done today and what could be changed. Of course, resource savings is a goal of this program, helping a laboratory reduce their energy, their water, the waste that they're producing, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and there's also cost savings that go along with that. But researchers also often experience this greater sense of collaboration, not just among their lab, but between entities at their organization. You might form a closer relationship and a positive relationship with environmental health and safety, or your building management group, or the team of people that maintains your freezers, the core facilities that support the work you do. All of that tends to blossom and grow further through this program. And then, of course, innovation, exploring new processes and what could be done differently in the lab on the day-to-day. The My Green Lab certification program is a part of the United Nations Race to Zero. It's one of the 2030 breakthrough outcomes for the pharmaceutical and medtech sectors. And the specific goal in the UN Race to Zero is that 95% of labs across major pharma and medtech companies will be My Green Lab certified at the highest level by 2030. Laboratories can get certified at any of 5 levels, with green, of course, being the highest. And just thought I would throw in a couple of case studies here. We've had some of our customers that have gone through the My Green Lab certification program quantify the return on investment of this program. AstraZeneca is a sponsor of My Green Lab, and they also have had many laboratories go through this program in recent years, and a group of labs are coming back to get recertified this year. But what they estimated is with a $60,000 investment in My Green Lab certification for their R&D labs, they achieved a 4.3 return on investment due to the energy savings that came out of doing this program. So really amazing return on investment for them. And they're not alone in seeing the benefits of this program. This is a smaller sample size, a group at Technical University Berlin that went through the program, and they saved significant energy, primarily through plug load changes, They also implemented an equipment inventory program, but they saw an ROI of 13 times the investment in terms of energy savings. So the My Green Lab certification program, it's not free, but it is, we try and make it a very reasonable cost, and it's a way for laboratories to really take a deep dive into all aspects of bringing sustainability into their lab. So the other certification program we have is called the ACT label. And the ACT label is like an eco-nutrition label for laboratory products. And there are ACT labels for consumable supplies in the lab, equipment, and also chemicals and reagents. We work with many different manufacturers. I'm going to switch to the next slide really quick. These are all the manufacturers that have ACT labels now. Maybe you recognize some as some of the groups that you purchase from. And these companies, they go through the process of getting ACT labels on their products. And then those ACT labels go into a database that's freely available for anyone, anywhere in the world to use. The ACT label, it does look like an eco-nutrition label, and it rates these products on various categories that are important to understanding the environmental impact of the whole product. So the manufacturing process, the energy or the water impact in the laboratory itself, if it's a piece of equipment, and then also end of life. What's going to happen to this piece of equipment when it, comes to the end of its usage in the laboratory? Is it recyclable? Is the packaging easily recyclable? Those sorts of things. Is it made in a facility that is a very energy efficient or all renewable energy facility? Those sorts of things. A lot of the large distributors of laboratory products have their own rating systems for whether something is eco-friendly or green, maybe signified by a green leaf or a green star. But those are often labeling systems that are only within that one manufacturer. So the goal of ACT is to have a way to compare between manufacturers of all the different laboratory products that we all use regularly, so that you can go and find a lower environmental impact pipette tip, for example, or a particular freezer that you need to purchase for the lab. And I will say that the ACT label database is going through an overhaul and a revamp. So hopefully in the next few months, it will be much easier to use. But it is there and it's available, and I encourage you to go check it out. You can find that on the My Green Lab website as well. And again, it's totally free to use and look at the ACT label database. And one way that you can drive if there's manufacturers that you buy from that are not on this list, make them aware of the ACT label. A lot of them already are, but it's important to hear from their scientists that it's something that, transparency. ACT stands for accountability, consistency, and transparency. So let's help these manufacturers of our lab products be more transparent about the environmental impact of the products that they are producing. And through this program, they are driving down the environmental impact of their products because they want to improve year over year. All right, so beyond our certification programs, I want to make sure you're all aware of the My Green Lab Ambassador program. This is probably our most popular program, and it's also one of our newest. It was started just a couple of years ago, 3 years ago now, maybe. We have over 6,000 ambassadors around the world now, from 50 countries. And what this program is all about is connecting people that care about laboratory sustainability. It's a very easy entry point to laboratory sustainability. You watch 4 videos that were made in collaboration with the National Renewable Energy Lab a few years ago. And those labs simulate a conversation within a laboratory at a lab group meeting about how a lab can save energy, reduce their water use, reduce their waste, and bring green chemistry into their lab. So you watch those videos and answer a short quiz. And so it's very low barrier to entry to become a My Green Lab ambassador, but it gets you thinking about how to start having these conversations among your lab team. whether it's in academia, if you're in a clinical laboratory, if you're in a pharmaceutical or biotech company. How do you talk about this? And then once you've completed that first step, you're given the option to join a Microsoft Teams channel that's just for Migraine Lab ambassadors. And people pose questions here. People share other resources that they're finding out there in the world that pertain to lab sustainability. And so we're trying to promote the conversation between countries, across regions, and across different lab types among these ambassadors. So this is a free program. Anyone can join, and this is where our ambassadors are around the world today. This program has grown really fast. Another great benefit of the ambassador program is that we host usually monthly free webinars for our ambassadors on a variety of topics. So we've had conversations about green chemistry. I've presented about the freezer challenge there. Sometimes we have ambassadors come and speak about what they're working on in their laboratory. We have some companies with really interesting new technologies come to speak. So those webinars are all recorded and available to the Ambassador Network. And so you can watch live or you can watch after the fact. It's a really great program, and I encourage you to join. All right, and then the last program I'll mention before we talk about the Freezer Challenge is the Migraine Lab Accredited Professional Program. This is our newest program. It is a way for you to get a certificate of achievement stating that you are a Migraine Lab Accredited Professional. This program has now been endorsed by the Royal Society of Chemistry as well, and you can either take one of these 6 modules or all 6, but these are the 6 topics. And really, if you want to take a deep dive into laboratory sustainability, what is known about issues of waste or issues of water consumption and water conservation in laboratories specifically, this is the program for you if you've wanted to just take a deep dive into these topics. They are self-paced, some videos, some reading, images, diagrams to help you understand these various topics. And there are quizzes throughout, and you can become a Migraine Lab accredited professional that way. All right. So let's talk about the International Laboratory Freezer Challenge. And I hope some of you are familiar with the Freezer Challenge already, but if not, we're going to go into it in detail. One thing I want to say up front is that the 2024 Freezer Challenge ends on Monday. It ends on July 1st. The timing of this webinar is interesting. However, it's still not too late to sign up. So even though there are only a couple days left, think about over the course of what I'm about to say, if whether your lab has done some of the actions in the Freezer Challenge and you'd like to submit a score sheet, you absolutely can do that. However, if it seems like doing something before the end of day on Monday is just ridiculous, that's okay too. The Freezer Challenge runs annually. It usually runs from January 1st to July 1st. Next year might be slightly different. Stay tuned for more detail. We might shorten the period of time that the competition is actually held. We're hoping to, do some changes to the platform that is used for the Freezer Challenge and just make this program even better than it is today. So that might cut into the early months of next year. But the best way to stay in the loop about the Freezer Challenge is to be on the Migraine Lab newsletter and also just check in on the Freezer Challenge website. So importantly, I need to mention the International Laboratory Freezer Challenge is a partnership program between Migraine Lab and another nonprofit, the International Institute for Sustainable Laboratories. And we have partnered on this program since 2017. And we do the awards for the competition at the I2SL conference in the fall. So the Freezer Challenge is, at its simplest level, a competition that focuses on laboratory cold storage. Happens every year. It is global. We have many, many countries represented and many, many research organizations. And the way this works is that labs work at their own pace to fill out an online score sheet that covers about 20 different best practices that pertain to laboratory cold storage. And those actions or topics are in these 5 categories: preventative maintenance, inventory management, energy efficient upgrades or retiring unneeded units, temperature tuning, and then some cutting edge actions. And so the score sheet acts as your guide through these various actions. And importantly, labs pick and choose what actions they want to record. Some labs go through and just do one thing, and then they submit their data back to us. And some labs really work at it for 6 months to a year. They try a bunch of different things with the goal of reducing the environmental impact of their cold storage. So let's talk about that. Why is there a competition focused on laboratory cold storage? Well, if any of you are in biorepositories or in labs with many refrigerators and freezers, you understand that these units consume significant energy. Of course, they are on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year until something goes wrong. They store our most precious samples, and we need to protect those samples so that they can be used for research. So we're not out on all the money that was involved in generating those samples or getting them from a collaborator, and so that we can do the important work in healthcare, in biotech and pharma, and in academia that we need to do. So this is a category of equipment where it can be very catastrophic if it fails. And there are many things that we can do to ensure our units are running most efficiently to ensure that they don't fail. So this is a multi-pronged, there's many reasons for doing a competition pertaining to cold storage. It's just a very critical piece of equipment, and many labs have a lot of them. So let's talk about some of the numbers really quick. So a single family home in the United States consumes about 25 kilowatt hours per day. That's our benchmark for energy consumption. An ultra low temperature freezer at negative 80 degrees Celsius can consume anywhere from 10 to 12 to 30 kilowatt hours per day. There are very energy efficient units on the market today. 5 years ago, that was not the case. And a lot of these units were regularly consuming 20 to 30 kilowatt hours per day, the same amount of energy as a small single family home in the US. Minus 20 freezers can consume anywhere from 1 to 5 kilowatt hours per day, and then refrigerators 1 to 3 kilowatt hours per day. A lot of this the differences in these energy ranges have to do with the make and model of the unit, the technology used in that refrigerator or freezer, and then also how well it's maintained. So if a single family home consumes the equivalent energy to an ultra low temperature freezer, we know that there are many of these units around the world and in laboratories. So there's a large energy impact from all of these units together: refrigerators, minus 20s, ultra lows, our cryo storage if it doesn't use liquid nitrogen, our cold rooms, our environmental rooms. All of this has a significant energy impact. And from my perspective, and I've been in the laboratory sustainability community for almost 10 years now, cold storage units are energy consumptive, very energy consumptive, second only to the fume hoods in your lab. And there are some labs that are very cold storage driven, have very high plug loads, and your biorepositories are an example of that. So that means that cold storage is a great opportunity for focusing on improving the energy efficiency of our labs, reducing the carbon that's going into the atmosphere that runs our laboratory buildings. So there was a study that My Green Lab led in 2016, trying to estimate the number of these units, specifically in California, and then extrapolating to the rest of the United States. But there's anywhere from 440,000 to almost 1 million ultra lows in laboratories in the United States alone. And that was all done before COVID as well. So there's likely a lot more of these in our laboratories today. So with all that being said, this is why there's a cold storage competition. If you think about it, these units hold our most precious samples. We need them to work really well for their entire lifetime. And a lot of scientists are not trained on how to do a lot of the actions that can help our units be more energy efficient. And let's be frank, a lot of the actions that help us free up space in our units so we don't need to buy more units, they're an afterthought in the lab. They're not the main research goal, of course, but a lot of these actions that are a part of the International Laboratory Freezer Challenge help you do kind of an annual checkup on all of your cold storage units. It's a really healthy thing to do. We have many labs that come back year after year to do this competition because it provides a period of time and an incentive, because it's a fun competition, to take action with your cold storage units. So I'll just emphasize that this is a free, flexible program. You are not required to do any one particular action. Labs they pick and choose what they would like to do. And this website, freezerchallenge.org, has a ton of resources to help you do the International Laboratory Freezer Challenge. We provide detailed information about how the competition is scored, which actions equate to energy savings, and who has won in recent years. So I encourage you to check out freezerchallenge.org. I'm just going to go through the many participation benefits of doing this program. So of course, the goal of My Green Lab and I2SL is to improve the energy efficiency of cold storage around the world. But related to that is also reducing costs for your institution. A lot of scientists never see the energy bills for their institutions, but someone at your campus or your company pays that energy bill. So, you can drive down costs by reducing the energy consumption of these units. I think importantly to scientists, this program supports easier sample accessibility and improved sample integrity. And what I mean by that is by updating your inventory, taking time to do that on a regular basis, where in the unit you need to find what you're looking for. So that prevents long periods of time with the door open, which, I know you need to find the sample in there, but it's putting all your other samples at risk, or putting that at risk for your customers. So this program can also benefit with knowing what you're looking for quickly and keeping your samples safe. Risk mitigation, reducing the incidence of freezer failure through preventative maintenance. And then this program can also be a team building effort and project, and very collaborative. I encourage labs to have many people involved in doing the Freezer Challenge actions and not putting it all on one person. And then this program can also be fun. It's a competition. We share who wins each year. And we're looking at, for future years, the ability for labs to understand how their competition is performing in the program as it's happening. So right now we announce the winners at the end, and every lab that participates understands will get an energy savings impact, an estimated energy impact of the actions that they did. But we want to provide greater transparency and visibility to how, say, all academic labs are competing together and how those labs are doing during when the competition is going on. So how does the Freezer Challenge work? So if you go to freezerchallenge.org, there's a button that says register. You fill out a short form, and that's how you register for the competition. You are immediately redirected to a blank score sheet. And then from there, you fill out your information. There's 5 or 6 different pages, and you can implement cold storage best practices based on the guidance in the score sheet. There's also a lot of information on our website to help you do this. And importantly, since we only have a few days left of the freezer challenge this year, you can count anything that your lab has done since August of 2023 on this year's score sheet. So we're basically accounting for an entire year of actions for the 2024 freezer challenge. You need to click finish on the final page of the score sheet to submit your data by the end of the day on July 1st, 2024. That is on Monday. And all labs that participate receive an estimate of their lab's energy savings through their efforts in the program. And the top laboratories and the top organizations that win their sector of the freezer challenge receive recognition, and we do that in a few ways. We are going to, for the first time, well, actually the first time since 2020, we did a virtual award ceremony in 2020 due to the pandemic, but we don't usually have a virtual award ceremony, but we're going to have one this year to recognize all of the lab winners. And everyone who is a part of the My Green Lab community or a part of the freezer challenge will of course be invited to listen in on that. We also recognize the top organization winners at the I2SL conference, which will be happening this fall. And all of the winners are featured in an article that's done by Lab Manager magazine. And of course, they live on in infamy on the Freezer Challenge website. So like I mentioned, we have resources to support labs doing the freezer challenge. There is a participant kit so that you can share that your lab is participating or your organization is participating. Spread the word at your organization to get more labs involved. The more labs that do the freezer challenge at your institution, the higher the likelihood that you're going to win one of those organizational awards. We have a guide called How to Win the International Laboratory Freezer Challenge. There's a section on our website for resources to succeed. We have a blog, lots of different references and resources there. And even if you don't do the freezer challenge, you can think of this as a place to go to learn about your freezers and all of your cold storage units, and learn how to do preventative maintenance, learn how to do inventory updating and those sorts of things. So I'll mention really briefly the cold storage best practices that are a part of the competition. These are a subset of them, and I've pulled these out because I think they are most applicable to biorepositories. So first and foremost, of course, preventative maintenance. In the freezer challenge, you can track whether you've done any full defrosts, which involves powering off your unit, removing all the samples, of course, powering off your unit, allowing it to fully defrost, and then powering it back on again. But also some things that can be done when your unit is on: vacuuming the dust from the intake areas, the filters, the coils, cleaning the filters, brushing the ice off of the door seals and the inside of the cabinet, and then sample management, of course. Biorepositories probably do way better at this than, say, an academic laboratory, but sample management, updating your inventories, converting standard size freezer boxes like 9x9 or 10x10 that fit into a standard rack to a higher density format if you are storing smaller volumes of your samples. Another aspect of this that probably doesn't pertain much to biorepositories is cleaning out and discarding mislabeled, expired, duplicate samples that nobody knows what they are anymore. This is really important to do on a regular basis for many types of laboratories, probably less so for biorepositories. Energy efficient upgrades and also retiring of units that are unneeded. So permanently retiring units that are no longer needed in your lab space, that are freed up and emptied because of the sample cleanouts that have been done. And retirement, you know, we consider this a unit that will be turned off for at least a year, donated, or disposed of entirely. And we encourage labs to retire their most energy consumptive units first, if possible. But one that might be more pertinent to biorepositories is if you need to purchase new units, purchase energy efficient units. So you can look to the ACT label to understand the environmental impact of some refrigerator and freezer types that are out there. You can also look to the Energy Star website, which is a website of the U.S. Department of Energy, to see the energy consumption of various types of units. Look for the Energy Star rating as you're perusing what your units you're looking to buy for your lab. One of the goals as well is to ensure your cold storage fleet doesn't continue to just grow and grow and grow. These are units that get plugged in and then they stay on for sometimes decades. So keeping a manageable fleet size if possible. And then some cutting edge practices that might pertain to biorepositories, particularly upgrading to a barcoded inventory system if you haven't already, letting other labs at your research institution know about the freezer challenge. You get points for doing this. And this is a form of social norming of sustainable practices. And then the benefits, of course, to doing these cutting edge practices are, improved sample accessibility, expanding the benefits of all the actions that your lab is doing with your cold storage to other labs, kind of infiltrating the energy efficiency potential of other labs at your organization. And then you can also be seen as a leader at your organization if you're talking about topics like this. So if your lab or labs at your institution have done any of these types of best practices since August of 2023, even just one of them, I encourage you to sign up for the freezer challenge. And you can do that really quickly on our website. But these are a list of all of the best practices that are included. Ambient sample storage, we're going to hear more about that in a few minutes from Cache DNA. But reminder that all score sheets must be turned in by end of day, July 1st, in order to count for the 2024 competition. But if that doesn't sound good to you, you can also think ahead and strategize about how your organization is going to do the freezer challenge in 2025. I just wanted to highlight some of the biorepositories that won in 2023. We do have an entire lab award category that's for biorepositories and shared equipment facilities. And we give an award for labs that consider themselves to be within the government sector or a federally funded lab. We have awards in the hospital clinical sector, awards for academia, and an award for the biotech and pharmaceutical sector. So these are the labs that won the biorepository awards last year. A lab from Kew in the United Kingdom, this lab from the University of College Dublin in Ireland, the Amsterdam UMC Biobank in the Netherlands, and then LabCorp Central Laboratory Services won for the biotech and pharmaceutical sector last year. We have labs from all of those sectors participating, and these are the stats from last year. We had almost 2,000 labs finish the program in 2023, and our goal is to get 2,500 labs to finish the freezer challenge by the end of the day, Monday. So would love to have your participation if you're not already engaged in this program yet. And of course, we're trying to do good in the world through this program. So through the actions that all of the labs have done in the freezer challenge, we've cumulatively saved, well, in 2023, we saved over 20 million kilowatt hours, which is the equivalent of over 37 million miles driven by a gasoline powered vehicle. And it's over 14,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent avoided through the actions of these labs and these research organizations. And since 2017, we've saved over 44 million kilowatt hours. So I'm really proud of this program and what we've done with it. And it wouldn't happen without the involvement of scientists and technicians and laboratories around the world. All right, the final thing I'm going to mention here, I want to leave time for questions. The final thing I want to mention is that most laboratories do the freezer challenge as participants. They're filling out a score sheet, they're submitting data for the actions they've taken in their lab. But if you are someone who has a broader role at your institution, at your company, or if you have connections to many labs at your institution, there is a role that we call the site coordinator role. And I mention this because organizations often will take the data that we can provide from the freezer challenge and use it to do an internal competition at their own research organization, whether it's a company, a university, a hospital system with many clinical labs. We can provide you with all the data that's submitted on these score sheets so that you can recognize labs at your own institution. Maybe you can give them, give labs that win at your institution a gift card for a local restaurant, a certificate, even just do an awards ceremony to recognize their efforts in the freezer challenge. So many different organizations have conceived of different ways to do this. And I am happy to talk with organizations more about how to run an internal competition. But that's something that we can do and provide. But the site coordinator role, you get visibility to all the score sheets started by your institution, so you can understand who's participating in this program. Hopefully you can provide some incentives or recognition at your local level. So we're exploring how to do this more in different ways, but it's been working well for the last few years. But just that being said, many organizations just participate as a lab. But if you have many labs from your institution doing the program and someone wants visibility to that, we can make that possible. And any organizations are not required to have a site coordinator at all by any means. It's just an option. All right, some of the Freezer Challenge winners from the past that have been featured in Lab Manager magazine. You can go to freezerchallenge.org to register. And with that, I will take any questions. I will leave. This is the My Green Lab team, so sorry for rushing through these last few slides. Most of the My Green Lab team, and yeah, I'll take any questions you all have. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Christina. That was a wonderful presentation, and I must say that all the work that you're doing at My Green Lab, it's very inspiring. It's such an important topic. So I'm sure you're going to have lots of interest from the biobanking community, and it's great to see a number of familiar biobanking names in the audience. We've got 2 questions so far in the Q&A, and I'm sure there will be lots more. Can I just ask members of the audience to please type in their questions into the Q&A. We have very limited time for answering the questions, but let's see how we go.
Yes, I'm looking at the questions now.
Okay.
So first question that came in, we're going to establish a biobank at our hospital in Pakistan. Currently, we are in planning and procurement phase. Are there any guidelines available to initiate eco-friendly and green labs? I have wanted for a long time for My Green Lab to have kind of a, you're setting up your lab, here's what you should do. We do have a blog post that's talking about design considerations for more sustainable laboratories. Asim, I can send you that blog post, after the fact, after we're done with this webinar. I'm sure I can get your email from Robert and send that to you. But if you're establishing your biobank, I encourage you to purchase energy efficient units. I mean, that's probably the very best thing you can do, or consider what Cache DNA is about to talk about. Yeah, and you'll want to make sure that your building and your space is able to remove the heat from whatever room you're going to have that's going to have lots of cold storage units in it, so that the units run efficiently, and also so your space is not too hot. But yeah, those are some starting guidelines. I think purchasing energy efficient units is probably the best thing you can do from the get-go. That will save you money in the long term, even if it's a slightly more upfront cost, because you're going to save on your utility bills. I'll move on to the next question. How much energy does an ultra low temperature freezer use when the door remains closed all day, and how much does it increase if the door gets open twice a day? That is a great question. I mean, when a unit is closed all day, still that large range of energy consumption that I shared is probably still true. It really depends on the make and model of the freezer. It even, matters like what sort of environment that unit is in. Is there stuff stored on top of it? That's not necessarily good. The freezer needs to breathe. So having some space on the sides and even behind the freezer so that ventilation can be really effective. Making sure the ambient, room temperature of the room it's in is per manufacturer guidelines and not super hot. But yeah, anywhere from 12 kilowatt hours a day to 30 kilowatt hours a day. That can be the energy consumption of a unit with the door closed. I would say the more that a door is being opened, the less energy efficient that unit tends to be. And the longer the door is open, that has significant impact on the ability of the unit to get back to its set point quickly. So I don't have specific numbers for like what the difference is between keeping a unit closed all day and 2 door openings. There is a report, which maybe I can link to some resources in this Q&A box while Cache DNA is speaking. But there's a report that one I referenced earlier that tried to assess the number of ultra low temperature freezers around the world back in 2016. That report is like 100 pages long, and there's a lot of really interesting information in there. And that report helped establish the Energy Star test method for ultra low temperature freezers so that there could be an Energy Star rating for those units. And it very well could have some information about door openings in there. So I will link that for you, Cameron. Hopefully that's helpful. Yeah, the next question that came in, does the total number of samples in an ultra low make a difference when the door is opened? Maybe less airflow, more thermal mass, lower temperature change. So my understanding is that if you have a unit that's mostly empty, it's going to be, and you open the door, it's going to be challenging for that unit to get back to set point, or it might struggle to, or take longer than if there is a lot of thermal mass in the unit. And so that's why it's better to run cold storage units more full instead of having them more empty. It might be the case, I've heard of biorepositories that have a different freezer for every customer. And what that might result in is, you have a customer that takes up a shelf of a unit instead of, having samples that fill the whole unit. I don't know specifically about regulations that are important to biorepositories that call for keeping, different customer samples or different study samples separate. I would encourage you to look at what's required and maybe try not to do that, because you will run a more efficient unit if your unit is more full for a longer period of time. And there are some things that can be done if you have lots of empty space. I encourage people to use those styrofoam coolers that get shipped. If you have one that fits the shelf, it can be empty, still has air in it, or even cardboard boxes that are closed to kind of keep some air thermal mass in the unit, especially for upright freezers and refrigerators. That can be important. Like cold air tends to like fall out as you open the door. Less important for chest freezers. So I don't want to take up Cache DNA's time, so I'm going to turn it over to them. Thank you all so much for listening in, and I hope you do the freezer challenge.
Thank you very much, Christina. And if you have information to share at the end of the Cache DNA session, just let me know.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you very much indeed.